Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. After more than a month of gridlock and fruitless debate, which we have chronicled extensively on this show, the administration has reached an agreement tonight with congressional Democrats to end the government shutdown. There's a deal. What exactly is in it? Well, we'll tell you that in a minute. But first, just before dawn this morning, the FBI raided the Florida home of longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone, who'll be joining us in a minute. A CNN producer stood across the street recording it all with a camera as dozens of heavily armed agents piled out of vehicles and swarmed Stone's house. Some carried high-powered rifles with extra magazines hanging from military web gear. Others wore helmets, body armor, and tactical gloves. At least one agent carried two separate rifles in addition to his sidearm. The man in front of him appeared to have a flashbang grenade on his belt. The whole team scrambled over Stone's lawn and pounded on the door. Stone appeared. He was barefoot and wearing a T-shirt. The agents slapped him in handcuffs. Before they let him away to jail, Stone told the agents that his wife was upstairs with their dogs. Stone's wife is deaf and didn't understand what was happening. Stone was worried that one of the men in tactical gear might shoot her by accident. Tragedies like that regularly occur during law enforcement raids. And that's why federal agents don't raid the homes of people like Roger Stone. There's no need to. Stone has no history of violence. He doesn't run an international drug cartel. He hasn't been charged with murder or even with spying for Vladimir Putin. Roger Stone is accused of lying during the course of the Russia investigation. Under normal circumstances, during normal times, prosecutors would just call his lawyer and arrange a surrender. Stone is 66 years old. He's so broke from Mueller-related legal expenses that he can't afford health insurance. He is hardly a flight risk. But no, that's not what they did. Instead, the feds went with automatic weapons and a cameraman from CNN. You don't need to be a Roger Stone partisan, a fan, to see that there is something wrong with what happened this morning. The most powerful person in America is now an unelected prosecutor with no functional oversight over what he does. Robert Mueller commands, in effect, his own domestic army. You just saw them. He can use it however he likes, and he does. Mueller crushes people when it's not even necessary to do it, weak people mostly, and he does it in ways that are clearly designed to send a political message. That is not how democracies are supposed to work. And you'd think our media would be bothered by this. Reporters are not supposed to side with prosecutors who abuse their power or anyone else who abuses power. They are supposed to hold the powerful to account. That's why they exist, but not anymore. Now they're all on the same team. Robert Mueller is a hero to our press corps. When his agents raid the home of an elderly man charged with piddling crimes, they air the tape and they celebrate.
Roger Stone, like Donald Trump, is a political con man whose showman shtick has finally caught up with him.
Let me be the first to say, if you look up the word scumbag in the dictionary, you're going to see Roger Stone's picture there.
I am just so damn happy this guy is indicted and arrested. He is a horrible human being. He is a thug. He is a bully. Bye-bye, baby. Karma is a bitch.
How'd you like to have her in charge of your life? So damn happy. So a barefoot Roger Stone is taken to jail. If that thrills you, it may be time to take a break, pause, and reassess what's happened to your soul. But no one reassessed today. They rejoiced. One famous neocon summed up his feelings this way, quote, "Given his proclivities, maybe Roger Stone would enjoy prison." Ha! Get it? Stone may get raped behind bars. How awesome is that? So how should the rest of us people who aren't spending our lives on Twitter feel about what happened this morning? Is America safer? Well, not if you believed in the Russia collusion story. We still haven't caught those villains, assuming they exist. Indeed, 2 years in, there is still no evidence at all that any American committed an actual crime during the 2016 election. Roger Stone, for example, stands accused of misdeeds committed long after the votes were counted. His alleged crimes arose from an investigation into other crimes we have not yet found. The charges against Stone include obstruction of proceedings, witness tampering, 5 counts of lying to Congress. The core of the charges, is that Stone mischaracterized his conversations with a left-wing talk radio host called Randy Credico. Credico, prosecutors say, served as an intermediary with Julian Assange, who runs WikiLeaks. Now, none of what Stone or Credico did in their conversations with Assange is illegal. Journalists do that kind of thing all the time. It's the lying, we are told, that must be punished with jail time. Okay. But again, and we've noted this before, what you're looking at here is a brand new standard of conduct. one that nobody who's been paying close attention to this country for the last 20 years would even recognize. There's an awful lot of lying out there, an awful lot. A lot of it's not even acknowledged as lying. Every time an illegal immigrant lies to a federal immigration officer, that is a felony. Every time a politician lies under oath in the Congress, that's a potential jail term. Both of those happen a lot, but nobody is ever charged for any of it. Now, this is hardly a defense of lying. Lying is bad. It's corrosive. It's one of the main problems with our political system, actually. Everybody lies all the time. But there is at least one thing that is worse than lying, even lying under oath, and it's the selective application of federal law. One standard for the powerful and well-connected, former attorney generals, for example. Another standard for barefoot 66-year-old men with unfashionable political views. Some people skate, others are destroyed. It all depends on who you know. That's what America is becoming, and we ought to fight that. Roger Stone joins us tonight. He's been in the news all day. He's the author of a new book called The Myth of Russian Collusion. Roger Stone, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here, Tucker. I'm a little tired, but I'm glad to be here.
So just to get the mechanics of what happened this morning out of the way, we've seen the tape shot by CNN, which remarkably was across the street from your house very early this morning, and we saw the very large number of armed federal agents bringing you out of the house. Is there something we don't know? Do you have an arsenal at home? Had you made threats against prosecutors, threats of violence? I mean, is there context that we don't have?
No. First of all, it's disconcerting that CNN was aware that I would be arrested before my lawyers were informed. So that's disturbing. If it was a dangerous situation, which would merit the SWAT team, well, then CNN's cameraman would be in danger. I don't know why they would be allowed to be there. I had no firearm in the house. I don't have a permit for a firearm. I don't own a firearm. Only my wife, my 2 dogs, and my 3 cats were at home. I'm not a flight risk. In fact, I think my passport has expired, or it will expire in a few days. I have no record of criminal past. And frankly, they just could have contacted my attorney, and I would have voluntarily turned myself in. The proof of this is that only hours later, the judge granted me a $250,000 surety bond, meaning on my signature with no funds put forward, because I'm not a flight risk. And as far as the government's contention that they were concerned that I would destroy evidence, they've been in my email and my text messages and my phone calls for 2 years. Probably longer, because the New York Times reported on January 20th, 17, that I was among 3 people in the Trump campaign under active surveillance. Hopefully we'll learn something about that in discovery of this case.
So that's actually, that gets right to the heart of the charges against you, which are primarily for lying to Congress. And one of the things that you're accused of lying to Congress about is whether or not there was any evidence, you had evidence of communication between you and an intermediary and Julian Assange. Did you lie about that? Again, given that you knew that they had your electronic communications and would know the answer already, wouldn't that be a stupid thing to lie about? What is this charge about?
Yes, indeed. It's really simple. I did forget that I had text messages from an old cell phone that were entirely exculpatory, which proved that everything I had said about Credico being my source regarding the significance and the October release date of the WikiLeaks material was accurate. I believe he lied to the grand jury about that. That's been reported, but he appears not to be being prosecuted for perjury. But I forgot exculpatory information, and therefore I will. If anybody had bothered to read my website, The Stone Cold Truth, they would know that I've basically refuted and documented the refutation of virtually every charge in this indictment. The indictment is thin indeed. So what is this about? It's about silencing me. There's a war on alternative media. There's a war where they're trying to criminalize political expression. There's a war where they're trying to criminalize free speech. The efforts to shut down my show at InfoWars, the efforts to silence Alex Jones, who's one of my greatest supporters and proponents, are part of this war. So I intend to plead not guilty. I believe I will be vindicated. It's funny to watch Preet Bharara on CNN say this is a slam dunk, calls me a liar. Here's a guy who a federal judge lashed for lying in the William Walton case. You're the liar, Preet. So, and then watching reporters jump to conclusions, Tucker, and say, oh, well, the Trump campaign official who directed Stone to find out about WikiLeaks was Donald Trump. No, it was not. There are several things in here in the indictment that are simply not true.
So who was it if it wasn't the president? Who is?
Well, I have to speculate about that because since it never happened, it appears to me that they have composed testimony for someone. Perhaps Rick Gates, perhaps Steve Bannon, perhaps someone is bearing false witness against me. But knowing what's in my email and my text messages, there is no corroboration whatsoever for this. And as for my email exchange with Steve Bannon, everything I told him in the exchange was publicly reported information. Politico reported that after Assange announced on October 1st that he had nothing that day but would have releases every week for the next 10 weeks and that all information on the election pertaining to the election would be released in the weeks before the election. That was public information. It had also been reported that Assange had security concerns that day. So the two things I told Bannon were public information, not the slightest bit controversial.
When and how did you learn that WikiLeaks had these stolen emails?
When Julian Assange said it on CNN on July 22nd, 2016, and then repeated it on Fox on August 24th. This was not a state secret. Randy Credico was the source who told me that the material was significant, dynamite, a bombshell, and so on, and that it would be released in October. There's also, I think, a reference to Dr. Corsi in here, Dr. Jerome Corsi, who told me in an email when he was in Italy, August 2nd, that the WikiLeaks disclosures would come shortly thereafter, and there'd be another one immediately after that in August. That all turned out to be incorrect. So there's no evidence that I received anything whatsoever from WikiLeaks, that I knew the subject or the content of this material.
Right. Well, that's
this is being used to silence me.
That's not even in here. The allegation, as far as I can tell from reading it, is that you lied to this congressional committee. Have you spoken to the president about this?
I have not, but again, if you watch CNN or MSNBC, you wouldn't know that because they act as if Stone act as the conduit between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks, or between Donald Trump and WikiLeaks. When the president answered the written interrogatories, he correctly and honestly said, Roger Stone and I never discussed this, and we never did.
So it's clear. I mean, it's clear from reading the indictment, and you've been saying it for at least a year, that the feds were spying on your texts.
There's no question about it.
I don't think there's any question. I agree, based on the indictment that they released today. So given that they're reading all of your texts, you text with a huge, I happen to know, a huge number of journalists, including me, and some of them, work for CNN even maybe. All of those texts were being read by a federal prosecutor. What do you think those journalists, some of whom are talking about this case right now on TV, think of that? That's the amazing thing, is the press is not coming out and standing up against this war against free expression, this war against the First Amendment, which is really a war against the press. Look, Tucker, I think we both know the game here. Wear Stone down financially, make sure that he's broke so that he has to plead guilty to these charges, even though he didn't commit them, and then try to flip me against the president. I'm facing $2 million now in potential legal fees. People can go to stonedefensefund.com to help me, stonedefensefund.com. I'm in for the fight of my life, but I will not quit. I will not fold. I will not bend. I will not bear false witness against the president. I intend to fight because this indictment is fabricated. This indictment is thin as can be. My attorneys are highly confident that they can win an acquittal if I can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia. What are the potential consequences you face? What are your lawyers telling you they believe prosecutors will push for in terms of a sentence?
It's impossible to say. They have not yet had discussion. The only other thing I do want to say is the FBI agents this morning were extraordinarily courteous after the initial confrontation in which I was handcuffed. But I was then taken to the federal courthouse where I was shackled, hand and foot, and went through and had to sit in the holding cell before the judge. The judge was eminently fair, issuing bond. I'm restricted in my travel. I can only travel to the District of Columbia, New York City, and southern Florida. But I'm not a flight risk. I'm 66 years old, and I'm essentially broke since the leaks from the special counsel's office over the last 2 years have dried up my consulting business, since the censorship and shadow banning on Facebook have substantially dried up my book sales. As you know, I had to end my life and health insurance in December because I couldn't meet the premiums anymore. Every dollar I scrape up has to go to this fight, but still, I fight on.
I mean, do you notice a theme here? It seems like everyone who gets ground up in the gears of this investigation lacks the resources to really fight back. I mean, I noticed that no one called Podesta has been pulled into this, but it's you who can't afford health insurance. It's Papadopoulos, who seems broke. It's Carter Page. Who do you expect the prosecutor will indict next, if anyone? Where's this going?
Well, I have no idea. They seem to be in hot pursuit of Dr. Jerry Corsi. Dr. Corsi said a number of things about me that are not true, but he says he won't testify against the president. I have the emails and text messages and metadata to prove that many of the allegations he's made against me are not true. But he clearly is referred to, blindly, of course, in this indictment.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, but
I
mean, just take 3 steps back. Who cares? No offense to Jerome Corsi, who seems like a nice guy, but does anyone in America believe that Jerome Corsi is in any way or any sense a threat to American national security or our way of life or democracy? I mean, is he? It seems crazy.
I don't think so, nor do I think that legitimate political or journalistic inquiry regarding what the topic of the WikiLeaks disclosures is should be criminalized. I never received any purloined material, and no, I never knew that John Podesta's emails had been stolen in advance, and my tweet is not a reference to that. And a research memo that Jerry Corsi wrote me regarding the Podesta's extensive and lucrative business dealings in Russia is not part of a cover-up, because no cover-up was required.
So let me ask you the last question. When you watch the clip that we played, I don't know if you had time to watch the coverage of you on television today, or you read the internet and see people cheering for you to get raped in prison, or people celebrating your indictment. What do you make of that? Where does that come from?
Well, I must tell you, we're in a very bad place in terms of our politics. I get 4 or 5 death threats a week. I can't go out to a public restaurant or an airport or travel by myself now because people want to mix it up. They don't want to just yell at you. Some of them want to take a swing at you. I don't feel that way about them. I disagree with them, but I'm not for violence. I don't think violence solves anything.
I agree.
So it means, again, now I need security for my family, for myself, and that costs money, which is why I've asked the public for help.
Roger Stone, we'll be following it. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tucker.
Andy